Women have been asking me, how important is it for me to strength train or lift weights? And while you may not know this about me, I spent time as a personal trainer and have a deep connection and love of strength training. And while I can tell you all day long about how important it is for building bone density, preventing and even improving osteoporosis, longevity, and so much more, I thought it would be the right call to bring in my strength training professor, Dr. Wayne Westcott. He is a world renowned expert on strength training. He's done so much research, written hundreds of papers, dozens of books, and more importantly, he is one of the most humble, kind, grounded humans you will ever meet. I'm so excited for you to listen into this podcast. I want you to make sure you listen to the whole thing because there are some absolute nuggets of gold for your longevity. So if you're a woman in midlife, or honestly any human on this planet listening to this podcast, this really is not specific for women. Please listen in, take what you learn and apply it to your life because Dr. Westcott is the authority on strength training. Let's learn from him about how and why this is something we absolutely need to add into our lives. Let's dive into this conversation. Hey friend, welcome to Living Inspired. I see you trying to feel better, and I see you doing your best. Maybe you've tried the diets, the supplements, the protocols. Nothing seems to stick long term. And there's so much noise out there. It's so hard to know what to listen to. I'm Rachel Carta, a functional nutrition counselor, life coach, and registered nurse. I'm here to guide you one gentle step at a time so you can feel more calm, more clear, and like yourself again. Around here, we reject hustle culture because healing is not about doing more. It's about creating space to listen. I believe your symptoms, mind, body, and soul are signals, and I'll teach you how to tune in and listen. Here on the podcast, you'll find simple practices and honest conversations to help make life feel a little lighter and a lot more inspired. So grab your notebook, a cup of tea, or listen while taking a walk, and let's dive in to today's topic. So today I have the absolute honor of sitting down with someone who's shaped the way that I think about strength, aging, and what's possible for our bodies, Dr. Wayne Westcott. If you've never met him, Dr. Westcott is one of the most respected voices in strength training research. He's a retired department head and professor of exercise science at Quincy College. He's conducted numerous research studies on resistance training. He's published 100 peer-reviewed papers, several hundred professional articles, written 30 books and strength training chapters in 10 national certification textbooks. He's presented his research information nationally and internationally, including many lectures for Harvard Medical School, Yale Medical School, and the American College of Sports Medicine. Wayne has received the highest honors from numerous professional organizations in the fields of medicine and exercise science. Wayne and his wife Claudia live in Abington, Massachusetts, and it's such a beautiful little place that I've been to. But here is the part that stands out the most. Beyond all their credentials, all the awards, all the books, all the articles, and the influence that he's had on the fitness industry, he's one of the most humble humans I have ever met.
Thank you.
I was lucky enough to cross paths with him years ago, actually in 2010. We were just talking about this before we hit record, and we've stayed in touch ever since. I was one of his exercise science students when I was in my personal training journey way back then. Truly, the lessons I've learned from him have stayed with me, both personally and professionally. His way of teaching is grounded, it's generous, and it's full of his heart. He has this rare ability to take something that feels intimidating, and you're going to hear a lot of different numbers in science today, and he has a way of making it feel simple, doable, and empowering. That's why I'm so excited to bring him on here today. Whether you're in midlife, whether you're navigating hormonal shifts, or you're noticing changes in your energy or your metabolism, or if you've been curious about strength training, but you weren't sure where to start, you weren't sure if it's good for you, maybe you feel like you're too old, this conversation is going to give you clarity, confidence, and so much encouragement. So settle in because you're about to learn from the best. Thank you so much for being here, Wayne.
My goodness. Rachel, thank you. I'm honored to be. That's the nicest introduction I've ever had in my
Oh,
career. Thank you very much.
oh my
From
goodness.
one of my very, very best students and professional, accomplished professionals that I know. Thank you for the honor of being with you for this podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. And I have so many questions, but I really would love to start out. So you've written all these books, done all these articles, done so much research, but how did it all get started?
Well, I'll try to be brief on that. I did do some strength training when I was a boy. I was a track and field athlete, a distance runner, middle distance runner, but my best friend was into strength training. And so I got him to join the track and cross country teams. He got me to lift weights with him. So I did that. And then after I graduated, went to Penn State University. And after I graduated, I had a job back in my hometown waiting for it. It was very nice. And I said, I'm having so much success with my strength training, and I did as a boy. I said, I wonder if we could put that into the curriculum. I taught at an elementary school, and I coached sports at the high school, but I taught the elementary. And so I worked with our board of education, and I worked with, I think, the state board of education, if I'm not mistaken. And they said, yes, you can do it as long as it's safe and supervised. Oh, yes, of course. So we started strength training our fourth, fifth, and sixth grade students, the boys. Back then, we had boys physical education and girls physical education, and I just had the boys, and they loved it. We did it after school. We had a little strength training club, and all the parents had bought barbells and dumbbells for their children, but they didn't know how to use them. So we brought them all in, and we had a wonderful setup. We set the whole gym up. It was a large gym, and we would supervise the strength training. It was incredibly successful and really well received, not only by the students but by their parents. And we had such good results that when I went back a couple years later to Penn State for my master's degree, I was a teaching assistant, and they said, "You have some experience in strength training. Would you teach our strength training classes for the regular students, not the professionals, but all the students had to take physical education?" And I said, "I'd love to." And then I did research at that time also on strength training, looking at frequency of strength training, a variety of other things. And then just as I graduated, I went back to actually I stayed at Penn State. They invited me to stay and teach there, which was wonderful. So I taught and I coached track at Penn State, and we did a lot of strength training there. And then eventually they said, "We'd love to have you stay here, but you need to get a doctoral degree." I said, "Oh no." So I went to Ohio State. I was blessed with a doctoral fellowship there, and I continued to do strength training. And then as I went into the field, I went to different colleges, universities, and also to YMCA's with real people, where I could do with youth and seniors. I've always done strength training studies, and at some point, some publishing companies asked me to write some strength training books, and it went from there. But it started very humbly with just starting out in strength training with my friend, and then trying to apply what I had learned to the students that I was teaching. And then at that point, after going back to graduate school, just loving the research that showed that it works so well for actually people of all ages. Our research went from 6-year-olds all the way up to 90, 95-year-olds.
Wow. So from 6 to 95, strength training benefits are obvious. And I do want to dive into that. I know that for women right now, there's been some books written and some like in people of influence talking about how muscle is the organ of longevity. If anyone is listening and they're wondering, should I pick up a weight? Is this something that I should dive into? When we think about muscle being connected to longevity, what do you think about that?
100% correct. The muscles are the engines of the body. That's where, everything takes place that involves movement, and we want to move as long as we can. The heart is a very important fuel pump, and we always, in almost every study we've ever done, we've done hundreds of studies, we always include cardio as well as strength. And we also include flexibility, although strength can do both of those as well, which is interesting. But we always include those, and we want a balanced approach. But as you age, as we all age, we lose our fast twitch muscle fibers that enable us to do power activities, especially like say sprinting or jumping or playing sports like football or even soccer, things of that nature. We tend to slow down as we age, and it's neuromuscular. It's both the neurological system and the muscular system, if we've discussed before. But as you slow down, you also lose the ability to maintain your your normal activities, and you also lose at the same time using that power, you're losing muscle endurance as well as cardiovascular endurance. So your running times, whether they're in sprints or middle distance or long distance, they start decreasing. But for the longest period, not forever, but for much longer than speed or endurance, your strength maintains. You can maintain strength into your 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, and I'm getting closer to 80 than 70 now, but still the strength, the running speed, not good. The running endurance, not so good, but the strength stays up there. And so as long as you have the strength, you can do most all physical activities. And as we'll probably discuss throughout the session, it helps you maintain your metabolism so your metabolism doesn't slow down as quickly.
Mm.
And it helps you to avoid fat gain because muscle is very active tissue and it burns a lot of calories every day. And strength trained muscle, whatever your age, will burn about 9 calories per pound per day if you were just in bed all day. Whereas non-strength trained muscle, if you're not doing strength training, you could be doing other things, be doing walking, etc. If you're not doing strength training, that same pound of muscle will burn about 6 calories per day. So you get a 50% metabolic increase, at least in the muscle metabolism, not your entire metabolism, but your muscle metabolism, by doing strength training, 2 or 3 days a week, whatever fits your schedule. We can talk about those parameters too. But it's so important. The muscles are where energy is released and where movement originates and where power is produced. So we don't want to neglect the muscles and not associated, I should say. Not only does it affect metabolism, but of course, our muscles pull on our bones, which maintains bone strength and reduces the risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis. And we've also done studies on that. It can reverse bone loss as well. That can reverse muscle loss. So at any age, strength training is valuable. I shouldn't say any age, but from ages 6 through our oldest subjects have been about 100 years of age. So 6 through 100, it's a very functional activity in terms of practicality of daily living, but it's also a very safe activity. The way that we strength train, we don't have injuries. I guess you could have an injury, but they're very rare. We've done studies with thousands of subjects. I'm serious about that. Some of our studies had almost 2,000 subjects in them, and we've never had a serious injury.
Wow,
We've had people drop a weight on their foot sometimes,
yeah.
but nothing else.
Yes. Well, and that just speaks a lot to the proper training and how important that is, and knowing what you're doing and having a professional to show you. So you said so much there that's so important, but I want to pull out one thing that I'm hoping everyone heard. You lose the fast twitch muscle as you age, which this is what you said about the playing soccer and the sprinting and things like that. When someone heard that, they might have been like, well, I'm not going to care about that when I'm older. But you said something more important, losing the ability to do activities of daily living. I also work in hospice. I go into nursing homes. I see what happens to the body when it starts to break down.
Mhm.
And for me, now that I'm in my 40s, when I'm lifting weights, okay, my priority now is I want to still maintain my ability to walk up and down stairs, carry my groceries, do anything I need to do strength wise at any point. That has been a shift for me. Whereas before, it was a lot more aesthetic. I wanted to look a certain way, I wanted to be smaller. Now it's more about being strong. And I think if we could change the perception around focusing on being strong, that would give people more motivation to keep going, even when they feel like, why am I lifting weights for all these years?
Yes. I'm going to take that to the extreme. I can't believe you're the age you said you are. I wouldn't have not guessed that. But you look exactly like you did. I don't know how many years ago that was.
15.
15 years ago, yes, when you were in our program, which we were so honored to have you, because you were quite accomplished already in the field of journalism and writing and all of those things. But we're happy that you're in this field, believe me. Anyway, we have done studies, a lot of studies with older adults, postmenopausal women, our osteoporosis studies with postmenopausal women. And we've also done nursing home studies with 90-year-olds. That was the average age, 89 point something, but 90-year-olds in our nursing home studies. And in those nursing home studies with men and women, but as you know, there are more women than men because men don't live quite as long as the women. But we had in 12 weeks of strength training, we had an increase in their muscle strength, their ability to do things with their upper and lower body, of 40% in their upper body and 80% in their lower body. When you think of ambulation and, like I said, climbing stairs or doing things of that nature, that's really important. So an average of 60%, if you take the upper and lower body, increase in strength. But they also, in the nursing home where they weren't really too active, and they gave us a lot of participants who needed assistance walking. They were either in walkers or even wheelchairs, and canes were very prominent. But after the 12 weeks, we did it in Orange City, Florida, very famous facility, nursing home facility down there. And they got out of their wheelchairs or did not need to use their canes or their walkers, with the exception of one of all the subjects who was a double amputee. She was still in her wheelchair because she had no legs. But everyone else was ambulating more, and yet though they were ambulating more, they had significantly less falls, which is very important for older adults. And if you have some fast twitch muscle fibers, if you do fall, you can catch yourself. If you don't, you're in much more a serious situation. But in terms of what I was looking at most, I wanted to know, again, we were talking earlier about, testosterone and things that promote muscle mass in men, but older women and older men, neither of whom have testosterone, can gain muscle, and younger people can do the same. And so in our 90-year-old nursing home participants, they had an average 4-pound increase in their muscle mass. That is huge. And it's usually about a pound a month. So they were even better than that because they were low to start with. So they had more potential to gain. And at the same time, and we didn't change any dietary behavior in their cases at all. They were, eating standard meals in the nursing home. And older people, the issue is a little more muscle loss than fat gain. But they lost 3 pounds of fat, added 4 pounds of muscle, and in that 12 to 14 week period, they changed their body composition by 7 pounds, all for the better, which enabled them to do so much more activity. And you say, well, how do you know they could do more activity? We know that because the nurses do a functional independence measure. It's called a FIM score of what they can do. Can they wash themselves, go to the bath themselves, brush their teeth, do activities of daily living? And that increased so significantly that when that research was published, over 500 nursing homes in the first year adopted that little program where we did, it was just 5 exercises twice a week, but it was enough. There were multiple joint exercises. They were on machines, so it was very safe for the older adults, but it was enough for them to make those incredible improvements without dominating their whole day or scaring them if they had to spend too much time in the gym. The whole workout took them about 10 minutes.
Wow. So everyone lean in if you didn't hear what Wayne just said. Okay. 10 minutes exercise for 14 weeks,
Yeah.
changed body composition of people that lived in nursing homes that are around average age of 90.
Yes. Yes. The average age was 89.5, I believe, for that study. Yes.
And some of them got out of their wheelchairs and could walk
And
again.
they did. All but one that had the wheelchairs was able to get out of the wheelchair. And the other thing was, except for some of them went from assisted living to independent living, which is, if you're that age, that's huge to go from assisted living facility to
Yes.
independent living. We had a husband and wife team that the husband was independent and she was in assisted, and they were able to get back together again because
Make me
she
cry.
became that much stronger. Now, that's just one of numerous studies. We do research, but there are far better researchers than myself. And the big one in that area was Dr. Miriam Nelson from Tufts University. And we love Miriam. We get along closely. And we work with other universities here in the Boston area, like Harvard and Tufts, et cetera. And she found that they not only increased muscle mass, but increased bone density significantly. And we also did a bone density study that showed that those who did not, this was a 9-month study, those, and these were women, postmenopausal women, who did not do strength training, they lost 1% of their bone in that 9-month period. Those who did strength training did not lose anything. Dr. Nelson studies, they actually gained. Ours, it wasn't quite statistically significant, And you're the expert on nutrition, but when we added a little more protein to their diet, because older adults oftentimes don't get enough protein, and we added a little protein and we used the Harvard Medical School recommendations, Dr. Apovian's recommendations, who works with us on some of our studies, which was 0.7 grams per pound of ideal body weight. When we added that nutrition component of the extra protein, they had a 1% increase in bone density. This is in their 60s. People said that can't happen, but it did. So we think that the musculoskeletal system is certainly benefited by sensible resistance exercise. And we know that the neuromuscular system is also, we look at balance scores and other things of that nature, power, for example, which is neuromuscular. And we see those scores increasing as well. So I'm not saying you're going to live forever, but you can have a much better quality of life if you maintain your muscular strength.
Wow. So that is just so amazing. And when I think about, I'm sure the mental benefits of that, the psychological benefits. I mean, I know what it's like to be in a nursing home, and I know what it's like to feel like I'm not doing my exercise. I was telling you earlier that I had a long string of chronic migraines for years and couldn't exercise as much, and I know the mental toll that that took. So I can't even, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. But when you think about the mental benefits that you saw, I'm sure they were enormous.
We, I'm old, as you know, so I've done a lot of research over the years. And one of my research partners, we have great research partners, they get the credit, not myself, but one of my research partners is Dr. James Nessie. And he probably, without question, is a leading health, fitness psychologist, exercise psychologist, not physiologist. You and I are exercise physiologists, but he's an exercise psychologist. He's awesome. And we still keep in touch to this day. We just talked a couple of days ago. And he and I did studies where we looked at the psychological aspects of doing strength training, again, with older adult women, postmenopausal women. And we found significant increases in self-efficacy, self-regulation, like the ability to do exercise and follow nutrition plans, etc. And certainly in the areas of depression, significant improvements, less depression as they did their strength training protocol. It gave them so much confidence that they could do things that they hadn't done years before. For many years, they hadn't been able to do those things, and it just increased their self-confidence so much. But he had a whole list of, it's called the profile of mood states, and it's got all this list, and he did all those analysis. I analyzed what they did physiologically, he analyzed what they did psychologically, and it was equally impressive in both areas. The emotions are very important, and when you can't do things you used to do, it's depressing, and strength training really helps with that.
What if someone's listening and they don't know what you mean by strength training?
Strength training means that you use a resistance, you let your muscles work against resistance that is a little greater or a lot greater, but it has to be reasonable. We can go over those parameters later, but use a little more resistance than you normally use in your daily activities, because as people age, even though they're doing their daily activities, it's not enough to maintain muscle. And so the average woman loses between 5 and 10 pounds of muscle per decade, and that's progressive. So in their 30s, it's more like 5 to 6 pounds. In their 40s, per decade, 6 to 7 pounds. In their 50s, 7 to 8 pounds. After age 50, Dr. Miriam Nelson from Tufts, who's done so much research in this area, she's found that postmenopausal women, 50 and over, are losing about 10 pounds of muscle per decade. That's a pound of muscle per year. And women don't start out with that much muscle in the beginning. So when you're losing muscle at that rate, everything decreases, all of your physical abilities. And we talk sometimes your psychological abilities parallel that, or most of the time. So if we can maintain muscle by doing a little harder exercise, I don't mean that in terms of doing it longer, but just a little heavier, a little more intense is the word we normally use, like using bands or using dumbbells or barbells or machines, or even your body weight in certain exercises that would be challenging at first, but will get better if you don't have any equipment. But doing things like chair dips or simple things, or push-ups against the table, whatever it might be. But as you increase the resistance progressively, the muscle responds by becoming stronger. That's the neurological component, but also regaining some of its size, its mass, and that's the physiological component. They're both physiological, of course, but that's so impressive when we see people in their 90s adding 4 pounds of muscle in 12 to 14 weeks. That is, I think that was a 14 weeks, 14 weeks. That is an impressive improvement. And they realize that, they recognize it, and they see it in their daily activities. Their functional independence scores just went up so significantly that after a couple of years, over 1,000 nursing homes had adopted that little 5-station program that we did at John Knox Village in Orange City, Florida. Amazing.
Wow, that really is because it's like 4 pounds. That's like 4 years of life back in some ways.
Right. Yes. Right. Yes. You said that exactly right. Pound a year loss at that. Well, even more than that at that age. Yes.
When women are listening to this podcast and they haven't started and they're wondering, okay, I'm in my 40s or my 50s or my 60s and I've already lost. You can hear by the study that Wayne just shared with us that it's possible to gain that back and then some, and to really change the composition of your body for the better. Yes, it's nice to have the look of it. What's happening when we're losing that muscle? Like what I know we can't do the daily activities, but there's a lot more that's happening. Our bone density is
Mhm.
declining, which means that if you fall, you can easily have a break much easier than if you had stronger bones. What
Right.
else is happening as we're losing muscle?
Well, that's a very good point. Muscle has so many functions in the body. I'm going to digress just a moment from what you asked, but I think you'll see how it relates. Muscles produce hormone-like substances called myokines.
Mm.
And myokines affect all the other parts of your body. All the other tissues in the body are affected positively by myokines. You want myokines, and they're produced in the muscles, no place else. And so when we look at people as they age and they lose muscle and they lose the myokines, it has a negative effect on all the other tissues in the body to some degree. And we can discuss that more later, but I'll just go with two of them. One, which I want to mention, is it reduces your resting metabolic rate. That accounts for 70% or more of the calories you burn every day. And as your resting metabolic rate decreases, even if you're eating the same amount of food, you're going to gain weight because you're not burning as many calories, for 15 hours a day, actually all day. But it accounts for a large part of our calorie burn per day because most of us aren't that active. That's sad, of course, but we're not like working on a farm anymore, those type of things. So it affects that. But as you said, it also, whatever happens to the muscles, the myoproteins that make up our muscles, affects the osteoproteins that make up or compose our bones. And so when we lose muscle, we lose bone. And when we replace or rebuild muscle, we replace and rebuild bone. Like the study I mentioned, that those who did strength training and had enough protein to support the protein bases that make up muscle and bone, they not only replaced their muscle, but they also rebuilt their bone. But not only that, the muscles have a large effect, believe it or not, on cardiovascular function. They affect blood pressure to some degree. Every time your muscle contracts, it acts like an auxiliary heart, pumping blood either back to the heart or through the body. Your muscles affect as we see in our studies, your blood lipid profiles because of a variety of factors. So if you want to reduce higher cholesterol or triglycerides, our studies and many others have shown that strength training will assist in that, about the same as cardio training, interestingly. And also, if you want to reduce blood pressure, probably done more blood pressure studies than anything else because it's so important as people age. And we've always found a significant reduction in resting diastolic blood pressure and resting systolic blood pressure. Equivalent to that, when strength training is done properly, that you would find in a cardiovascular exercise program, and also very close to what you'd find in a drug-related program. So it has so many benefits throughout the entire body that it would be a shame to let the muscles, miss out on that by not doing a few minutes a week of strength training.
Yeah, absolutely. And you didn't mention the brain, but when I think about
Oh,
everything you're talking about, dementia, Alzheimer's, these are really fearful,
yeah.
diseases. And
Yeah.
if we have more muscle in our body, the effect on the brain, can you speak to that?
Yes, we haven't done as much research in that area. We've looked more at the emotional factors like self-esteem and that type of thing. But in the cognitive area, the research out of Canada has been very clear that strength training improves cognitive function.
Mm.
And that's really important for me. I need more cognitive function.
Yeah.
But it doesn't improve that. And it apparently reduces the risk of dementia or postpones that from occurring so earlier in life. Alzheimer's. My dad had Alzheimer's, but he's strength trained. We got him strength training, and he maintained he came down with Alzheimer's about when he was 86, 87,
Mm.
but and he had it, but he had such a gentle increase in the Alzheimer's or decrease in functionality, mental functionality, that he made it to 98 and was still doing pretty well at 98. Not great, but a lot better than most people. His this is just a personal observation. That wasn't a research, but his decline was at a much slower rate than most people who had Alzheimer's. So uh,
Wow.
we think that, well, I don't think, we know from other research studies, we did not do studies in that particular. We've done arthritis and low back pain and all those, and they've all been very positive associations with strength training, especially low back pain, which affects probably one out of every two people in the over 50 category. But we found that in the physiological area, it's always been helpful. And other studies have found that in the cognitive area, it is an important means of maintaining or at least reducing the rate of decline, maintaining the function and reducing the decline rate.
So, so important. And I think that when women, as women are aging from midlife to 50s, 60s, 70s, there is this noticing of gaining weight. And as you were talking, it's like if we're losing muscle at that rate, approximately 1 pound per year, as
Mhm,
it and that
mhm.
compounds, as you said, there would be a weight gain because of the lowering of that basal metabolic rate. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of words out there that are saying it's only the decline of estrogen that's causing this to happen, but it sounds like this loss of muscle because we haven't added the pressure of working out of the intensity to keep the muscle on our bodies. But if we were to keep it on or build it, we wouldn't be losing that muscle. Our basal metabolic rate would not decline,
Mhm.
and gaining weight does not have to be inevitable.
Right, exactly right. I can give you some numbers on that if you would like, or
Sure,
at least some
sure,
thoughts on that. Yes.
sure.
So in terms of weight gain, most American women do gain weight at about a pound a year after age 30, let's say. Okay, just they're not doing the activities and they're involved in their career and their family, and they have just a lot going on, and they're not as active as they used to be. And if they are active, they're not doing too much strength training, so they, as you said, they are still losing muscle. What happens? They go on a diet, and when you go on a diet, which is, that's a good thing in many respects. And there are many diets out there. I won't get into that. You're the expert in that field. But in terms of the diet, when they lose the weight, let's say they lose 20 pounds in a certain period of time, about 20% minimal, 20 to 30% on average, but 20% minimal of that weight loss when you're on a diet and cutting calories is from muscle.
Mm.
80% is from fat, and that's good, but you're losing 20 or 25% from muscle. Let's say that someone lost 20 pounds, and let's just take the average of the 20 to 30, 25% of that was muscle. So they lost 15 pounds of fat, but they lost 5 pounds of muscle, which really affects their resting metabolic rate and makes it almost impossible when they go back to their normal dietary pattern to maintain the weight loss. 95% of all successful dieters regain all the weight they lost within 6 months to a year. Certainly within 2 years, they've gained it all back because and they don't understand this because no one tells them. But it's because largely because their metabolism slow down even more. So when they go back to their normal eating, what used to be the right amount of food to maintain their weight is now too much because their metabolism is slower due to the muscle loss. So
Mm.
what people do, Rachel, they say, well, I'm gonna do exercise along with my diet, and that's great. And when they do aerobic activity along with their diet, and I actually have the numbers, so I won't give you the numbers, they're very impressive, but if you want them, I will. But when they do aerobic activity and diet, they lose more fat. And they say, this is great. And they lose more weight on the scale. They say, this is great. But they also lose more muscle when they do the aerobic and the diet, because it kind of overwhelms the body. Says, hey, you're cutting here and you're using more calories here. I've got to slow down. And so they actually improve in the area of fat loss, but they don't improve. They get worse in the area of muscle loss. However, when they do strength training and diet, they have a much lower muscle loss. In this numerous studies on that, when they do strength training and diet, they don't lose as much muscle. So it tends to be beneficial in that respect. They actually do lose more fat. So their weight loss is still more, but they're not losing as much muscle and they're losing more fat. But when we and McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, we have the best medical and exercise physiology researchers that I know, both of us have done studies in this. When you do strength training and diet and endurance, all three, which is really good, and a little more protein, because when you cut calories, you usually cut across the board. You don't get enough protein, especially when you're doing strength training. We add a little protein. We use the Harvard Medical School recommendation by Dr. Apovian of 0.7 grams of protein per pound of ideal body weight, which is a little higher than most people would recommend, but we've never had an issue with it. When we do that, we find that in a 6-month study, with still a very reasonable diet. We cut diet calories about 1,800 per day for men and about 1,500 per day for women. So it wasn't a real low calorie diet, but they wanted to lose weight, and they did. When we did those 4 things, the diet, sensible diet, a little extra protein, strength training, and endurance training. Strength training wasn't that much. It was 30 minutes. 3 days a week. The endurance training was 30 minutes, 3 days a week. Actually, 20 minutes was 20 to 30, 3 days a week. And they not only lost 14 pounds of fat in that time period, but they regained, remodeled, rebuilt 4 pounds of muscle. So in terms of their body composition, how they looked, how they felt, how they functioned, they made an 18-pound change in that 24-month period. So they changed their body by 3/4 of a pound per week. And it was not just, okay, I lost this weight, but I look terrible and I feel weak and I can't do anything. I feel stronger because I've added muscle and I've lost the fat and I look better. We looked at the measurements, of course, their hips and their thighs and their chest and all those things. And they were all so much better when they combined the strength training with endurance exercise. We love endurance exercise. As you know, we don't neglect that, but people are aware of endurance training much more than they are of the strength training. So we combine the two, and then we do usually use a little extra protein, either in their diet itself in some of our studies, or with protein shakes for those that are on the go and don't have time to shop around and do that. And we always find in all those studies a significant muscle gain, a very significant fat loss, in terms of their fitness, and a major improvement.
Let's lean in, everyone, because what Dr. Westcott just told us was that 20 to 30 minutes, 3 days a week of strength training with some endurance training, which could that be zone 2 cardio walking?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Walking is wonderful.
Zone 2 cardio, okay, and then we added some extra protein. You could do that with food or shakes, 0.7 grams per ideal body weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We could significantly change the composition of our bodies, increase muscle mass, lose body fat. That feels, and you said in all studies that happened.
All of our studies that happened. The studies there aren't too many studies that actually did that, but the ones from McMaster University up in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, they used 0.6 grams of protein per pound of body weight, and they had very similar results, just as good as ours, I'm sure. Well, I know they didn't carry their stuff quite as long as ours, but if you extrapolate it to the same length of time, we would have had very similar results. In fact, they may have had a little more fat loss than we did. We always do pretty well in the muscle gain, because those studies were done at Quincy College. When you were there and after you were there, we did those. Our staff are very motivating. They encourage people to to like strength training, and most people do once they start. We can talk about how little you need to do to get those results. Our people did just one set of 12 exercises, depending on how long they took between exercises. It was, 20 to 30 minutes, but they actually did about 12 minutes of actual muscular activity, muscular strength training, high intensity strength training. And the cardio they would do on the bikes or the steppers or the treadmill. And again, it'd be about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. We'd keep that parameter available to them. And it was 2 or 3 days a week. And by the way, in all of our studies, even back to my master's degree at Penn State, in the study there, in the strength training frequency, we have found no difference between doing this twice a week or doing it 3 days a week. So
Right.
1 day a week works very well, but not quite as well as 2 or 3. And 5 days a week with a less intense program also works, but I'm not sure how long that works because resting between workouts is important for the muscle to remodel. It have to have a little more rest than 24 hours typically. But we did find people that just do a brief strength training program, even every day, had excellent results.
I love that it's so much as possible when we don't have to think about devoting an hour at the gym every single day to get these
Mhm.
results. You also mentioned something really important that I say a lot, and it's about this diets having a 95% failure rate. I've heard 97, 98%. So you're saying 95, so I'm going to go with yours. It makes so much sense because when we're on a diet and we've cut calories, we're losing muscle along with the fat. The basal metabolic rate gets lower, so now you have to maintain a lesser amount of food to keep that weight where it is. Within 6 months to a year, people are gaining the weight back. And this is why we see this yo-yo dieting, which is harmful for the body to be going up and down in weight. So I love that it's possible to you eat a whole foods, healthy diet. Maybe
Mhm.
you're increasing
Mhm.
your protein, you're focusing on strength training
Mhm.
2 to 3 days a week for a minimal amount of time. You're taking a walk outside or riding your bike or going to the gym and getting on a piece of cardio. Zone two is not a high level where you're exerting yourself over.
Mhm.
And you can actually change the composition of your body. In
Yeah.
this world, everyone is looking for a quick fix. Everyone is looking for how to make everything happen faster. People are now taking GLP-1s, and I don't know if we want to dive into that, but there's so much going on. And really, the basics of what you said, this is the research proves that this is how we change body composition.
Mhm. Yes, you said it far better than I did, Rachel. Thank you. But I want to mention one more factor. This is the most important factor with weight loss, and you mentioned it, that the regain. Well, there have been hundreds and hundreds of studies looking at post-diet when people go back to normal eating, what happens. And you could count on, I think, one hand, certainly on two hands, the studies, and I think about five or six that have shown a maintenance of that the post diet body weight 6 months later. And most of them are psychological studies, and they're spending about $2,000 per participant to make sure that they don't get off the track. But we didn't do that. We had a 6 month post-diet study, what they call a maintenance study. And what we did, they went back to their normal eating. We didn't give them any dietary guidelines whatsoever, but we asked, could you still just take one protein shake a day to make sure you get enough protein? They said, yeah, we love the protein shakes. They were fine. They're convenient. So they could do that, for breakfast or lunch or whatever they wanted to substitute it for. But just make sure they had a little more protein. And we said, would you like to continue your exercise program? And everyone said they did. They liked exercise because it was brief and it was infrequent and it didn't disrupt their normal lifestyle. And so after 6 months of no dieting, back to normal eating and just that basic, 20 to 30 minutes of strength, 20 to 30 minutes of cardio, so it'd be 40 to 60 minutes twice a week or 3 days a week. They not only did not gain weight, they gained a little bit, but you'll see why. It was not statistically significant. So you could say, no, they gained no weight. They continued to lose fat, but in that next 6 months, they added another 3.1 pounds of muscle, which was like, what a bonus. They maintained their weight, but they did add just a little bit, but it was what they added was muscle, which they needed because they had lost so much of it. So they're just getting back to a healthier lifestyle. So the maintenance component of continue to do strength training throughout life. I'm like our people are doing it when we had 100-year-old people doing that in our facilities. So they can do it throughout life, and it's so beneficial. It's so time efficient compared to other things that it just makes sense to include it at least in your lifestyle.
Absolutely. And I know that sometimes like women's fitness classes can be a lot of endurance based, really high reps, really low weights, high reps. And I think what you're talking about is not that. It's more of the lower reps, more of the higher weight, so that you're actually needing the rest. This is the way I explain it to my people. I say to them that between 8 and 12 repetitions, you want to need rest after that 12. But your muscle wants to be tired enough so that it has to rest. And that
Yeah,
way you know you've reached a weight that is challenging for that muscle, the weight.
very well stated. Uh, Physiologically, endurance training uses the cardiovascular system. We call it aerobic exercise.
Mhm.
Breathing and longer duration. If you do something for a long duration, it can't be that intense because you'd tire out. So it has to be a lower intensity for a longer duration. But strength training uses a different energy system. We call it the anaerobic energy system. It means without air, without oxygen, and it's typically anywhere between, well, zero, but particularly for training, between 30 and 90 seconds. And so in our studies, numerous studies and other studies, if a person does a weight that they can complete 5 repetitions in, say, 30 seconds. We do slow controlled lifting, so you're not going to get injured. So say 5 reps in 30 seconds with a fairly heavy weight, that gives great results. If a person uses 10 reps in 60 seconds, which is roughly what you can do 10 times is roughly 75% of what you could do once. So it's not going to harm you. It's well below your maximum capacity. But 60 seconds is within that anaerobic energy system, which is what you need to innervate, I should say, to build muscle. If you went as far as 15 reps, and I like your 8 to 12, we use 8 to 12, but if you went as far as 15 reps, now you're down to about 60% of your maximum. And that works. You could do 15 reps in 90 seconds, and there's no problem with that. But once you get much beyond that, much beyond 90 seconds, it becomes more aerobic and it doesn't have as much of a muscle building stimulus. It now starts to be more of a cardio activity, not a real cardio activity, but it just crosses that line a little bit. So some places they actually time the amount you're doing the exercise. That's a little inconvenient. I suppose you could do it if you had timers on all of your machines or something, but the repetitions usually are a good means of determining, yes, this is anaerobic. This is challenging my muscles. I'm doing, as you said, we always recommend 8 to 12 repetitions, which is about 70 to 80% of what you could do one time. Very safe, very effective.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. It fits with what I've been doing. I've actually been doing 3 25-minute routines 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, separating muscle groups, getting myself back in after this long hiatus of migraine situations. So I'm so glad to hear that what I've been doing is good. And I have seen strength gains, even in it's been about 6 months, I would say, of consistency. I've seen strength gains. And whenever I start to notice that I can do 12, I'm increasing the weight so that I know that this is getting, quote, too easy, time to
Right,
kick it up a notch. So we're not,
right.
everything we've talked about, what do you wish that women in midlife understood? Like, if you could say one thing to them about building muscle in midlife, what would it be?
Yes. If you want to have a greater quality of life, and some would say, I don't have the research to support this, but some would say even a greater quantity of life, it's important to maintain a strong musculoskeletal system because we're meant to move. And the more we sit, the more we on a computer or on a cell phone or watching television or those type of things, the worse it is in so many ways.
Mm.
But if you can keep moving for activities that you like to do, whether that's walking or playing tennis or whatever it might be, dancing, golf, to some, if you walk between the greens, that would be okay. But if you like to be active, then you need a strong musculoskeletal system in order to support that. And as I said earlier, the myokines affect every other organ and tissue system in your body. I'll give you just a for instance on that, if you don't mind. Colon cancer is one of the leading causes of cancer death in our country. And colon cancer is associated with a slower gastrointestinal transit speed. In other words, the speed at which you move food through your system from time in to time out, the slower it is, the greater the risk of colon cancer. You want to have a fairly fast gastrointestinal transit speed, kind of move it in, move it out, and be regular and those type of things. And strength training improves that in a 3-month study. This is University of Maryland study. It wasn't one of ours, but in 3 months, it increased the speed at which food moves through your gastrointestinal system by 56%. That's almost 60%. You feel so much better. You function so much better. And it reduces your risk of one of the leading causes of cancer deaths in this country. So, I mean, that's just one example. I could give you many, many more of how beneficial it is in a variety of ways that you wouldn't think about when you think of, well, I don't want to I want to get bulky. I don't want to get too muscular. I've been trying to get too muscular for about 55 years now, and it hasn't happened, or 60 years. So it's hard to do. You have certain genetic limitations, but you want to maintain an optimal amount of muscle for your particular body. You don't want to lose your best friends. Again, the muscles, if you had to compare it to an automobile, the muscles are the engines of the body. That's where combustion takes place, where movement originates, where power is produced. The heart is the fuel pump, and it's extremely important. And we always do cardio in almost every study I've ever done. We've always included cardio because we think it's important. But the muscles are the neglected factor, and it does make a difference when people do it sensibly and regularly. There's someone have a systematic approach to this.
Yes, to have a systematic approach, to maybe have someone design a program for you or to follow a training program that's in one of your 30 books that I can link in the show notes so that people can maybe we can figure out how we can get those in front of people.
Oh, sure.
One thing that is just, I mean, you mentioned this. When I was a personal trainer, women would come to me all the time and say that they didn't want to lift because they didn't want to get bulky. And I used to always show them my body and say, look at me, I've been trying. I would make a muscle and say, I've been trying to make this muscle bigger for years and years. It's strong, but it just doesn't increase in size. And like you said, there are genetic limitations to that. So if you are someone who is concerned about that, remember that is very, if you see women online that look very bulky, very ripped, maybe they're doing weightlifting competitions, that
Mhm.
is not the norm. And that is usually done with different dietary things, different supplementations. That's not the norm of
Right.
if you start lifting weights, you're going to look like that.
And that's exactly right. And if you did decide that you're getting too much muscle, you just cut down on your strength training a little bit, if it was caused by the strength training, and you'll lose that muscle because it's a use it or lose it proposition. So it's something you can control. And if you get to the point where I like the way I look right now, then just maintain that particular workout. You don't have to continue increasing if you don't want to. I always like to I like to be as strong as I can because I know that my genetic limitations will not allow me to get too muscular, sadly. I
Yeah.
like to be too muscular, but we all have those genetic limitations. So I think it just makes sense to, fulfill your genetic potential if you feel that that's the best way to go through life in a functional, productive, practical manner.
Yeah, because it's just the more muscle we have when we're continuing to maintain it, the longer we can live our life to the standard that we're living it, meaning that you're not needing that extra help or that, ending up in that assisted living. If you can stay independent and just even I know for me, I noticed a big mental change when I was not able to strength train. I noticed that I was much more prone to depression. It was right on the other side of the door. That's actually why I started lifting in the first place. I was in a really bad mental place in my mid 20s. And I went to a gym. I don't know if I ever told you this story.
I don't
Um,
think so.
I went to a gym, and the gym owner was actually in a wheelchair. And what I was really scared of, should I go here or should I try this? I had never lifted weights ever. And he said, okay, he was very gruff. He said, I'll see you on Monday. And that was like my first personal trainer. So I started with him. He did the very basic machines, like very much like your type of programs, like not none of the fancy stuff, like very basic leg press, leg extension, leg curl, chest press, bicep curls. Like I still remember the routine like it was yesterday. And I noticed when I started lifting that my mental state improved. I no longer felt these depressive feelings. My body composition changed, but that wasn't even the main thing. It was the mental thing that I noticed the most. And then I knew I had to become a personal trainer so I could teach other people this amazing thing. Plus, I was one of these girls that was not athletic. So if I could do it, anyone could do it. So if I could start lifting and then start teaching spinning classes and do all the different things I did, anyone could do it. But I did notice then in my late 30s when things got harder with because of the migraines and I wasn't doing the strength training that I had done before, I noticed the mental effect and it did compound. So starting again with the lifting, it was very, very hard to get back into it. I can feel the mental effects. Anyone who's listening to hear that, if they're not sure if they should start, just start. Just start. 20 minutes twice a week and you can see gains.
Yes. Oh,
You
yeah.
can see changes happening in your body, changes happening in your mental state.
Mhm.
Wayne, what do you think is the biggest mistake that women or people in general make when they start a strength training program?
I'll answer that. I just want to say that what you just said, two of our college presidents said exactly the same thing. They said, we're doing this not because of the physiological benefits, which we really appreciate, but it says, we have so much stress. You have no idea. Being a college president, I don't. They said, this has been a godsend to us in terms of the mental and emotional benefits. So you're in good company with that, Rachel.
Okay, good, good,
Congratulations.
good.
The largest mistake is not doing it at all because of the reasons you just said.
Mm,
The second largest mistake is is jumping in and trying to do too much too soon,
mm,
or seeing all these different exercises and trying to do all of them. You don't need to do that. When we were at the college, we had about, well, we started out with 12 machines, and were very nice machines. So we had 12, which is ideal. But we added to that as we went on. After you had graduated, we moved to another facility, and the college president was so excited. He gave us a huge facility, and so I was able to bring in a lot more equipment. And it wasn't that I wanted everybody to do all those machines, but some people say, "Oh, I've got to do everything." Well, you don't have to. You could if you want to, and if you really love it, you can. But usually, we look at about 8 to 12 exercises, or even 6 to 12. We've done research for all branches of the United States military. In fact, we wrote the textbook for the United States Navy, the fitness textbook, and a lot of them are on ships, and a lot of them don't have a lot of time. And so we worked with a 6 exercise protocol and had almost as good results if you do it properly as 12 or 18 different exercises. So like you said, if you do the basic muscle groups, and all the exercises as well as anyone, but if you think of, okay, we have the quadriceps, the front thighs, the hamstrings, the rear thighs, and the gluteals, and a leg press will do that. Or if you said, well, I really want to isolate these, well, you could do leg extensions, leg curls. You don't have to do a leg press, but a leg press gets them off. You don't have a lot of time. And that's what I did when I was teaching. I have more time now because I'm retired. But when I was teaching, I just did the leg press. I said, this is wonderful. Or if you don't have machines, you could do dumbbell squats. Well, you know the exercise better than I do, but there are all
But
kinds of
our
alternatives.
listeners might not, so it's okay to talk about the
Oh,
exercise.
okay. All right. So you could do leg extensions or leg curls. You could do, if you say, well, my inner thighs and outer thighs are not where I want them, you have hip abduction where you move out, hip adduction where you move together. And these can also be duplicated with bands or with dumbbells, but with the machines, it's just a little more, it facilitates doing them hopefully properly, slow and controlled without jerking weights around or things that could possibly cause injuries. But then with the upper body, we have, like you said, the chest press works your front shoulders and your pectoralis major muscles of your chest, and the triceps muscles, the back of the arm, works them all together. And you could, if you had like we had a facility where you could do just chest crosses for your chest alone, and lateral raises for your deltoids alone, and triceps extension for your triceps alone, that's fine too. But if you wanted to save some time, a chest press or a bench press or a dumbbell bench press is excellent. If you said, for men and women, my chest used to be up here and now it's down here. I need to get it up here again. Well, then you'd go to an incline press, which works the upper pectoralis muscles. And it's a very simple thing to add. And it would also work your front shoulders, your anterior deltoids, and your triceps muscles on the rear of the arms. To work the opposing muscle groups, you would do a rowing exercise, and you could do that with bands as well as machines. Or I train mostly in my basement now, so I do bench rows. I do the rowing on a bench, but I support my back so I won't have any injuries. So you can do that for the upper back muscles, or you could do a pull down exercise. Most gyms have pull downs, which you could do, or you could attach that to something higher than you, like around a door, and do pull downs with bands, and that would work the upper back, the rear shoulders, the posterior deltoids, and the biceps muscle. So between those two, you've worked most of the muscle groups in your upper body, believe it or not. Between those three, I'll say, or between those four, I'll give it that way. But any of one pulling, one pushing is very good. And because as we age, our neck muscles atrophy, and we get that forward tilted head, especially in women, and then we get the dowager's hump if you progress that farther. So it's good to maintain some strength of these are called your trapezius muscles here, the lower part of your neck that go down to your shoulders, and your neck muscles. And so you could do an upright row or a lateral raise or something of that nature to maintain your neck function and your shoulder function, so that when you go to put something in the overhead bins, it doesn't come crashing down on everyone. You can do that. Then we go down to the midsection, and of course, in our facilities, we do the abdominal machine, or you could simply do trunk curls. We do the low back extension machine, or you could simply get, I love that low back machine. I don't have one in my basement. I do have a leg extension, leg curl, but not a low back. So I have a Bosu ball, those little half hemisphere type things, and I just do trunk extensions. And you can do that. If you can't do it without using your hands, you can use your hands so that you work your back, because we've done so many studies on low back pain, which is incredibly prevalent. About 80% of Americans at some point suffer low back pain. And we found that strength training reduces the risk of low back pain and assists in overcoming low back pain, and is just as functional as some of the low back treatments that people use for low back pain. And it gives you muscle strength at the meantime. So you can do the abdominal machine or the low back machine, or trunk curls and trunk extensions. Can work the midsection muscles. And then, as you said, and I mentioned, the squats are perfect. I couldn't fit a squat machine in my basement, but I could fit, because it's just, they're big, and not a leg press. I meant to say a leg press machine in my basement, but I could fit a leg extension and a leg curl, and that works the key muscles in your gluteals, actually, in the leg curl to some degree, and in your quadriceps, which also flex the hips. So it doesn't take a lot of exercise equipment or a lot of exercises to get an overall body workout. And those are some of the basics.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I have to just ask, because we're running out of time, but I want to quickly ask, when you were talking about the strength training machines, I can remember when you were my teacher that you were talking about Arthur Jones.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
remind me about that, because I still remember you talking about the invention of how machines came. And you don't have to go into a lot of great detail, but I just remember the story of the pet alligator. I don't know. Tell us a story, something that we're never going to hear anywhere else, that's going to make
Okay.
us just lean in for a minute.
Okay, I'll try and do that. Arthur Jones was a genius. He was very different individual, but he was a genius, and he had a love for animals of all kinds, especially wild animals, especially alligators, crocodiles, and poisonous snakes. Don't ask me why. I didn't have much interest in those three species, but as he made his millions for the Nautilus machines, he bought a huge horse ranch in Ocala, Florida, which is horse country par excellence, and he filled it with 67 African elephants instead of horses, which back then cost him $1 million. You're just in the hay to bed them down, let alone their food. So he made a lot of money on his Nautilus machines, thank God, because that spread and they were good things. But he also had over 1,000 alligators and crocodiles combined, which was scary enough. But then he had one big one that he rescued. I'll use that in quotes from Papua New Guinea, the river, the big river in Papua New Guinea, and it was the world's largest crocodile in captivity. It was almost 18 feet, and that he had that in its own special big pen. And then he also had a serpentarium with all these poisonous snakes, and he was bitten so many times. I'm surprised he survived by rattlesnakes and things, but he had cobras, etc. And I used to bring physicians down from Nauls. He'd send up a plane, we'd fly down, and they would see these machines because they were so important, and they loved the machines. These were the top physicians in the United States said these are important. Strength training is important, but he would always show them these things and scare them with the snakes and the crocodiles. And I always like to see him feed the crocodile. But once I questioned him, he's the one that came up with one set works pretty well, and it does. You can do more sets if you want that. If you love strength training, I do more sets than one, but one set works fine. That's what we use in all of our studies. And he's the one that came up with 8 to 12 repetitions, and that is a great range. I don't do it because he said so. I do it because it's 70 to 80% of maximum, and that's just perfect for building strength safely. But he also came up with slower training, not going so fast and using a lot of momentum and hurting yourself with inertia, but going up in about 2 seconds and lowering it even more slowly because he realized that you're about 40% stronger lowering a weight, that's just muscle physiology, than you are lifting a weight. And so he says, let's lower a little more slowly so you get some benefits to just letting gravity bring it down. Well, one day I questioned something, I forget what it was, but I questioned something he said, and I told you he was a little eccentric. And so he said, "You're questioning what I said?" And he was very eccentric. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I says, "Let's go feed Gomek." That was the 18-foot long crocodile. All right. And so we go out. So, okay, I like to see Gomek. They usually throw them over about 50 pounds of nutria, which were like muskrats up here in the north. They're down in Florida. And they weren't alive. They were, dead. And the croc would just crunch it in one gulp and swallow it. He was so big. And so we got to the pen, and he opens the gate and says, "Get in." I said, "Get in." He says, "Yes." I said, "Oh no." I'm face to face with an 18-foot crocodile. But he went in with me, and I know because he did a television show before he did his NOS on called Wild Cargo. He understood animals, he even understood crocodiles. Don't ask me how. And so he goes over. I would not lie to you. You know that. I would not lie. He goes over, and the croc's just there, half asleep, in his little pool that slants down. And he goes and kicks him under his lower mouth, which is about as big as half my body. And the croc wakes up and opens his, all I see is crocodile teeth. And this is a big crocodile. And I'm standing right in front of him. And before the croc could eat me, he had about a 40-pound bag of nutrient. He threw it in the croc's mouth, and the croc swallowed it, and one fell through. And he said, "Do you want to question that? Do you have any more questions for me?" I says, "No, Arthur. No, you answered them all. That was fine." He says, "Well, then we can leave now." I said, "That would be just fine." So we left. But that's the kind of person he was. He was
Wow.
very convincing.
Wow, wow. And just for anyone who doesn't know, Nautilus is a brand name
Yeah.
of the very first machines, weightlifting machines. So when you go to the gym and you see all the machines lined up, that was the name of the very first brand of machines, right? And Arthur Jones was the inventor. And I remember you telling me that he was doing an overhead pull down, and he realized that he couldn't get any stronger when it was back over his head. So that was
The
the
pullover,
invention.
yes, he invented the pullover machine. Yes, that
Yeah,
was the
so
first machine he invented. There were actually some machines before that called Universal Gym, and they were excellent. They made it convenient. But what made his machines different, now many companies do this. I've always loved Knowles machines, but he had a cam, kind of like an oval instead of a circle where the weight chain would go around that oval, and the oval would vary the resistance. And he was brilliant enough that he knew how to vary the resistance and design the cams, and his engineers did, so that when you're in a weaker position, as we go through our range of movement, we have weaker positions, stronger positions, and back to weaker positions. And many exercises, it's weaker at the beginning, weaker at the end, and strongest in the middle. And so he would design his machines with the cams that would pretty well adjust the resistance to a normal person's strength curve throughout the range of movement. So instead of being heavy in some positions and light in other positions, it was about equally challenging in all positions, which he felt, and is probably correct, made the exercise much more efficient. If you're getting a full challenge in all positions rather than just the one position, or you're probably getting a more full workout every rep. So he said, because we're getting more challenge with every repetition, we only need to do one set of each exercise.
Mm.
Again, our research has shown that one set works really well, but if you want to do more than one set, that's fine too.
Well, thank you for sharing about that. I hope that for any of you who decide to join a gym after this conversation, I hope you do, or I hope you get some bands or some dumbbells or something at your house so that you can start resistance training. But if you walk into a gym and you see a Nautilus machine, you can think of that giant crocodile. You can think of Wayne standing there. Okay, I'm never going to ask you a question again. Wayne, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I learned so much. I'm sure that my listeners have learned so much. The one thing that I'm hoping they take away is that they just need to start, that you don't have to do a whole bunch, that the basics work. This is what I tell my clients in terms of nutrition and lifestyle. I have something called the Vital Six, and the basics work. And from our conversation, that is what I'm getting out of it. Is there anything else that you want to leave listeners with today?
No, you've covered it so well, and you've learned more than I have because you're dealing with people every day. I did the research, and I had, instructors working with the what we call subjects or the participants, but the researchers often we miss the forest or we miss the trees because of the forest. I'm not sure which one we do, but you're working with people every day and you see what works and pretty much what works with one person will work with another, but everyone does have individual, abilities or disabilities. I shouldn't say disabilities in the sense that they are handicapped in any way. That's not what I'm saying. But some my good friend Dick, he's my best friend, and we've lifted together forever, and we do the workouts together. And he is always better than me at pulling exercises because that's the way his muscles are attached to the joints, and he has better leverage in pulling than I do. I'm always better than Dick in pressing exercise because my pressing muscularity has a little better biomechanics. So everyone is somewhat different. But in terms of should we all do the same exercises? I worked with not only the military, all branches of the military, about 6 different professional football teams as a strength training consultant. And the teams I worked with, it didn't matter. And their coaches understood this. Their strength coaches were brilliant. And I just kind of supported what they learned in practice by the research. But they said, we have everybody doing the same exercises. They all have the same muscle groups, whether the running backs or the linemen, they all have the same muscles. We want to get them all strong, and we train them all the same way. Now, the quarterback's not going to use as much weight as your lineman, of course, and there may be subtle differences, but in general, those basics, like I said, with our research with the Navy, and also we did a major study with the United States Air Force that showed that those basic exercises were so important, and they can be supplemented to some degree, but they provide the majority of what you're going to experience
Mm.
with your strength training program. So if you can do the basics well, and of course, these are the same football teams that won many Super Bowls, many Super Bowls. I'd give you the names, but they wouldn't mean anything to you at this point because that was 15 years ago. But they're the same teams that said, we do the basics better than the other teams. They didn't say
Mm.
we had more plans or more different designs, but we do the basics better. That's why we win the Super Bowl. So I agree with you 100%.
Thank you again. The basics work. It doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to take a long time. I hope that you are all walking away with feeling so excited to work out. I hope that you're feeling excited to get stronger. And as with all of our episodes, thank you for tuning in because every single time you listen, you are improving your life. You are growing, you're learning. I'm so grateful, Wayne, that you were here with us. And everyone will see you on the next episode.
I'm honored to be here. I learned as much from you as you did from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Living Inspired podcast. Your presence in this space is deeply appreciated. Remember, living a healthy life, mind, body, and spirit doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of conscious choices and intentional living. Each time you listen, you are taking a step towards flooding your life with positivity, love, light, and health. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with 3 friends. I'm honored to be part of your journey. I'll see you in the next episode.